Before Steam added its free-to-play section and became this gigantic source for MMOs, there were smaller portals that would have a modest variety of games to play through their launcher. The one I used the most often was IJJI, a game hosting software parented by the NHN Corporation. I used it because I loved the simplicity of it. There was just a list of titles that you could download, so you didn't have to keep going to a bunch of websites, and the games that IJJI hosted were unmatched at one point. So let's go to the beginning. It started out in 2006 where there were only 3 games you could play, and only one was 3D. It was called Golf King, a game I can't seem to find anything on, but I can only assume that the title explains enough. The other 2 were Gunbound, a turn-based game like Worms, and Gunstar, a 2D shooting game that was kinda like Unreal Flash, you know, that fan game that's a Flash version of Unreal Tournament. But once 2007 hit, that's when shit got real, because that's when IJJI went on a hot streak. It hosted Drift City, and it became one of the biggest online racing games of the time. And then there was Guns the Duel, a highly technical third-person shooter that gained a huge competitive following. And not only that, but Soldier Front came out, a first-person shooter from Korea that exploded all over the world afterwards. The success of these games gave them a steady stream of revenue, and they only added one game in 2008 called Lunia, a 2.5D anime RPG. As the IJJI community grew, they branded themselves as the social game site with the slogan "Where Gamers Unite." Which brings us to 2009, when they doubled their roster of games with even bigger titles like Soul of the Ultimate Nation, a Korean MMORPG, Atlantica Online, a turn-based fantasy game, and Alliance of Valiant Arms, the game that I spent the most time playing. It was at this point that IJJI surpassed the 10 million members mark, which was no surprise to me, because in every top 10 list you would see a couple of the games that they published. So after this 10 million mark, they switched up their ad campaign again. They ditched any and all Flash games, along with their bright orange logo, and went with a sleeker metallic design, changing from the place for all gamers to socialize to the place for hardcore gamers. But see, the thing is that the competition started getting fierce. Older games like Drift City were losing players, and although IJJI had Soldier Front and AVA, the first-person shooter market was heavily saturated, with other big titles like Combat Arms. And once 2010 hit, people were tired of the genres they've been playing and wanted something new. And this is when Nexon came out with Dragon's Nest and Vindictus, completely dominating the action RPG market in free-to-play gaming. And the MMORPGs that IJJI hosted were outshined by games like Runes of Magic and Allods. That, coupled with the release of numerous forgettable games in 2010 like Splash Fighters and Warrior Epic, and the unfinished Genesis AD, IJJI ended up starting to sink in a giant sea of online game publishers. And then comes 2011, when Steam sticks its big-ass platform right in everyone's face, and you can bet that IJJI partnered with them, making AVA one of the first 5 games in their free-to-play section available. But 3 months later, IJJI stopped allowing new players to register. Instead, they had new users link through their Facebook account. And in January 2012, it was announced that NHN sold IJJI to Area Games, a direct competitor at one point. And Area Games only hosted Guns the Duel, Soldier Front, and Alliance of Valiant Arms at first, but then re-released Genesis AD, calling it Repulse. Now personally, when Area Games took over, I was furious. It just didn't make sense to me, and I felt like it was a grave injustice. But now looking back on it, I had no reason to be angry. A publisher is only as good as the games that it can host, and what caused the death of IJJI wasn't that it had bad games, it was just because there were so many other good games coming out, and the cost to host these new games was probably getting out of hand. Today, if you play a new free game, it's most likely through Steam, or one of the few other publishers still alive, like Area Games, Nexon, or Perfect World International. But that's like comparing Walmart to some local mom-and-pop stores you see down the street, if you're comparing how much a publisher has to offer in sheer volume. Now, if you like this video, then subscribe to the channel, because I'll be talking about more games and their developers and their publishers, and even their mechanics. And don't be afraid to leave a comment. Right now, I read all of them. So tell me what your favorite game was to play through IJJI. Tell me if I'm pronouncing IJJI wrong. And I would also like to hear what you think of the future of online gaming and how it will develop.